Let's talk.
John Brown.
The Firkin Saga, right? I said this correctly. Don't snigger at the back. Brewing up entrepreneurial adventures and pioneering tales with the Prince of Ales. Now, if you have been living in the UK for a while, and I used to live around the Richmond area, so there was a Firkin pub not a million miles away that I used to fall out of on a regular basis. So I'm delighted to say that we're stepping into the wildly entertaining world of David Bruce, OBE, an unconventional entrepreneur and the legendary founder of Bruce's Beery and the Firkins brand. Good morning. Joins me live on the line now. Good morning to you, David.
Good morning. What a lovely welcome. I'm quite flattered and embarrassed all at the same time.
Well, it's good to see that you're not behind the bar somewhere. So
where said behind bars, plural.
Whereabouts are you today, by the way, sir?
I'm actually down on my lovely canal, the Kennington-Avon Canal, running between Reading and Bristol, and we're very lucky that we live overlooking the canal. I've just fed 40 wild ducks this morning that come waddling up for their meal. So it's pretty good life at the moment.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. Now, I mentioned that I used to drink awful lots in one of your establishments, which was the Firkin, one of the Firkins in Richmond. How many Firkins were at the height were there? Because there seemed to be a Firkin.
I, of course, started with one and then built up the chain to about 12.
Yeah.
And then I sold them. And guess what? There ended up being about 200 throughout the UK.
Blimey.
And they all ended up as a sort of a brand of allied breweries. And but they, of course, like so many big companies, go and cock it all up. So they then became a bit of a hot potato. And I jolly nearly bought them back. But then an old uncle of mine, who's a doctor up on the North Yorkshire moors, he said, "Oh, I wouldn't do that, my boy. It'll be like trying to resurrect an old love affair." So I just had to watch my fabulous brand just disintegrate. But that was about 30 years ago. So I'm glad. In those days, I always had to explain to people what a firkin is, because some people think it's a rude word, and it isn't. It is a 9-gallon container of beer. So you were one of my Firkin boozers then in those days.
Right. Okay. So what attracted you into the heady, hoppy world then of ales then, and the Prince of Ales?
I know, it's a lovely title, isn't it? At least I hadn't got the W on at the beginning of ales. I was out of work. I trained as a brewer at the old, for anyone who does sort of know England, at the old Simmons Brewery, which was taken over by Courage in Reading.
Right.
And that was before you were even an underage. That was before you were born, let alone an underage drinker. So I used to go to work on a trolley bus. Can you believe it? Well, they don't have any of those really, but nowadays. But anyway, I became a brewer, and then I ended up being the head brewer of a brewery up in Yorkshire at Massam near Ripon called Theakston's, where I brewed Old Peculiar.
Ah, very famous for all the drinking.
Very strong ale. And I asked the Theakston family, as I was the brewer, if I could have shares, and they said, "No, you're not called Theakston." So I said, my epiphany moment, well, stuff you, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go and start my own brewery, which I duly did in London, and it turned out to be the first brewery to open in London for over 100 years.
So whereabouts in London were you? And how difficult is it? I've never really thought about this, but how difficult is it to actually start your own brewery and get it out there, as it were?
Well, very good question. It was horrendously difficult. It really was. Pioneering. Somebody said somewhere in the book, because it refers to me as a disruptor and a provocateur, because the brewing industry was controlled by all the big brewers in those days with their bland, tasteless beers, says me. And I only had this opportunity to start because Truman's Brewery had given up a pub in Elephant and Castle. Now, it wasn't trendy like it is now.
I was about to say that. For listeners who are listening at this point...
You wouldn't want to go there in the dark or after 6 o'clock in those days.
You might bump into Jim Davidson filming another TV episode of his, whatever
horrendous.
It was called. Yeah.
So I had to get off the dole, basically, because my wife got fed up with keeping me as a kept man. So I was running one day past this closed-down, boarded-up pub and... went down into the cellar And it was a really big cellar with a lovely high ceiling of about 15 feet high. And I had my epiphany moment of, my goodness, this is big enough. I can put a brewery into this cellar.
Yeah.
And it was literally that sort of impulse. But we didn't have any money. I remember going back home that afternoon and saying to my wife, I know what I'm going to do to get off the dole. I'm going to start a brewery. She said, well, nobody's ever done that for 100 years, and we haven't got any money. What are you going to do about it? So we borrowed money.
Right.
And we had to offer our house as security to the banks, but we borrowed 10 grand off a bank.
Yeah.
And then we borrowed, ironically, 10 grand off some nasty big brewers that I don't like or didn't like, to sell their lagers, because I only brewed real ales, what would now be called craft beer.
Yeah.
But I did a business plan, and two things happened. One is it went to one of the top brewing and leisure analysts in the City of London, in the Square Mile. And he said, it came back to me a couple of days later and it said, this project has absolutely no chance of succeeding. I suggest you abandon it immediately. So one of my business lessons, which is in the book, is don't listen to the experts. The other thing which may amuse you, some of your listeners may remember the Midland Bank had an advertising slogan of the listening bank.
Right.
So I went to the listening bank, and guess what? They didn't listen. In fact, they came up with a wonderful response in writing. I've got it somewhere in my boxes in the garage, I think, my archives. And it said, if brewing in a pub is that good an idea, why hasn't somebody else thought of it? Now, isn't that brilliant? You know, when you're trying to be a disruptor, a provocateur, and a pioneer, and that's the sort of response of a bank.
But let's go back in time. I mean, this is what, late 80s, early 90s sort of time.
Well, it's even earlier than that. It's 79. I was scrubbing around trying to get the show on the road.
So this is
I then developed the Firkins through the 80s.
So this is a time when craft beer is what we would now call craft beer. And you'd have a hairband, a top knot, and whatever, and have a latte.
Yeah. But, and a baseball cap.
And a baseball
cap.
Yes, yes. But beer per se is what young men drink lager, don't they? They drink lager is the thing. Imported lager is the thing. So and things like an IPA was what Jock in the corner would nurse. I mean, I remember I used to live on West Hill in London, and it was close to the Wandsworth Brewery, and they had the porter, which was just they used to say it's back that was a big picture of the pint because it was so fearsome.
Love that porter dark beer.
Yeah, exactly. But 3 of those, and you're singing all sorts of different songs. But
two in my case, I'm a brewer. I'm a bit of a lightweight.
Yeah, exactly. So how did you convince people to drink, to educate them to drink what is now craft beer, which now everybody's doing, and B, that they want to be in your beer, in your bar, in your pub, rather than in a trendy wine bar, because this is going into the early 80s when every pub's trying to be a bleeding wine bar.
You're absolutely right. It was about the same time that as we were doing, starting to develop the Firkin, people were developing wine bars. So at least you had a choice. You go to a wine bar and drink wine, or you could come to one of my pubs and drink what was actually a unique beer, if you think about it. Because when I brewed it as a brewer, I just tried to make the recipe to be somewhere between Young's, you've mentioned the Young's Brewery and Fuller's Brewery, the two big London independent family brewers. So my recipe was to try to be something in between, which guess what? It was. And nothing was more exciting, bearing in mind everybody said it wouldn't work, that when I finally brewed my beer and served it in the bar for the first time ever, Bruce's Bitter, never brewed before by anyone, certainly not me, with my unique recipe. The bloke came in, he said, what's this beer? I'll have a pint of that. And I stood there in the bar in my white overall, boiler suit and Wellington boots and bits of hot hanging out of my hair and goodness knows what. He said, God, that's delicious. And he smacked his lips. He said, I'll have another one of those straight away. And that was my first customer. And it was really exciting all those years ago when someone just comes in out of the blue, sees the beer on the beer end, the pump, and says, I can have one of those. And then orders another one.
I mean,
he didn't throw up. That would have been awful, wouldn't it?
How do you say it? Falling straight over. I mean, how did you develop your own beer? Because, I remember there were light white beers in the 80s. There was like Eichbaum. There were all these sort of very strange, sort of very light hot beers. I mean, how do you actually you put your own individual stamp then on a beer then, Dave?
Well, we started off with what was then called, because it was in Borough, which is part of Elephant and Castle. There's actually a tube station there now. I then started doing experiments, and I came up with other beers. And one of the beers I did was called Dog Bolter, which was based on Theakston's Old Peculiar.
Yeah.
And then, funny enough, Ringwood Brewery down in Hampshire, they ended up doing Old Thumper. So we were all doing different things, and we started a little small brewers association, which I call Slobber. That's not spelt like you might think. It's SLOBA. It's a small London LO Brewers Association.
Genius. Absolute genius.
We were almost trying to out-brew each other, and I ended up doing some really ridiculous beers like Knee Trembler and Mind Boggler. And I even did one, because it was great fun in those days. The environmental health officer kept coming around to make sure I wasn't going to poison everybody.
Right.
And I did a really, really strong brew, and he had a couple of pints of it when he was on duty, and almost fell over, could hardly get back to the door. And then he rang me up the next day saying, "What is that beer that you gave me?" And I said, "Well, I haven't got a name for it yet." He said, "Well, I think you ought to call it Sphincter Special, because it went right through me."
Yes. I mean, how do you get the names for them, by the way? Because Knee Trembler, and I think I remember Dog Bolter.
Yeah, Mind Boggler, Dog Bolter, Sphincter Special. We didn't actually market too wide.
Strange.
But of course, the other thing we had was a lot of fun, and I think that's one reason why the Firkin brand evolved, because when we did out the first pub, I say we, my wife and I, very long suffered. 52 years she suffered me. You're lucky you just got me for a morning's interview, but imagine suffering for 52 years, poor thing. But because we didn't have any money, we had to just do everything on the cheap. So we just, the original Firkin was just bare floorboards, lots of mahogany bar and back fittings, brass, wood and glass. Honky-tonk piano. We spent £100,000 a year on pub pianists, hammering out on most nights of the week.
Fabulous.
And a massive amount of money in those days, remember, in the 80s, a lot of money. But the music side, and we had song sheets down to Fox and Firkin in Lewisham. And talking of that, we had ridiculous, very stupid slogans, which you wouldn't be able to have nowadays. The world is too woke. It's too politically correct. But in those days, the Fox and Firkin slogan, for instance, was, "For Fox's sake," F-O-X, "for Fox's sake, buy me a Firkin pint."
Yeah.
Phoenix and Firkin in Denmark Hill, southeast London, which was a burnt-out railway station, and it arose from the ashes, hence the name Phoenix. And the slogan for that was, what was it now? "Phoenix, my pint, I'll Firkin thumping." Now, and we had car stickers. This was before the breathalyzer, remember?
Of course. Also,
it was before the smoking ban. So these pubs were like, you could hardly see the other side of the bar in those days, because you'd have a pint there, you'd have got a bat. We had very simple food.
Yeah.
So we hardly had any room to sit down at tables, because it's sort of standing room only. And we had the slogan for that was, "Fill that gap with a Firkin bap." And so you've got some ridiculous sight of people with a pint and a bat.
And a fag.
And heads off, and then trying to light a cigarette at the same time with their third hand, which of course they didn't have. So it was a completely bonkers time, really. And we had car stickers, can you believe it, that said, "Follow me to the nearest Firkin pub." Well, couldn't they put that on a car?
Well, it doesn't say you're going to get a driver. You could actually leave the car there responsibly, get a taxi, get a black cab out of there, because obviously they always want to go south of the river in the 80s.
They used to queue up outside, just like at a railway station, because they knew even in those days, before the breathalyzer, nobody'd be able to drive home after 3 pints.
Here's the thing, because, in Kitchen Confidential, Anthony Bourdain's book about chefs and restaurants and all sort of catering and stuff, he says that if you like eating in restaurants, you should, if you've got made of money and you want something to do, and if you like eating in restaurants, do not go into the restaurant business, because it will blow your money, and just keep eating in nice restaurants. And if you like drinking in pubs and having a lovely time, don't buy your own pub or start your own brewery, David, because it'll completely shatter your illusions. So how difficult is it to actually, because everybody can do the hail fellow well met stuff and stand in the bar and get everybody a pint, and you're out of business in 3 months' time. So how difficult is it to actually, and again, we're talking about a world that is pub, so it might be a little bit shady. People have a few drinks, words are exchanged. Next thing you know, you've got pint glasses going everywhere. How difficult is it to actually to run pubs and make sure that,
It's actually really, really tough. But it really is. And very soon after I started, the first Firkin, it was quite tricky because I wanted to sort of do it all myself. At those days, I wasn't a very good delegator. I wanted to get it right. So I used to brew, can you believe it, from 4 o'clock in the morning
Right.
to about 11 o'clock, which was then opening time in those days. So 4 to 11, about a 7-hour brew. Then I'd try and run the pub through till 11 o'clock that night. And I was completely knackered. So we then brought in a brilliant pub manager that at least took over the pub side from me.
Right.
But I would say, everybody now, even now, whether they're managing a pub or they got their own pub, free house, tenancy, whatever it is, it's a real knackering life. You literally are there probably 24/7, and it's just got to be so good nowadays. The market is so competitive. You can't really take your eye off the ball. And I've seen lots of people that, they make a success of something, and then they ease off, or they put a manager in and it doesn't have their own personality stamped on it. So if anyone is thinking of going into the pub business, I really would suggest that they really think it through, because it just takes over your life completely. And I became a sort of workaholic, really. In fact, one of the reasons I sold up, 9 years after starting, is because I was knackered. I'd knackered myself completely by the age of 40, and I'd only got 12 pubs by then. But you need a break. And I think now what's really frightening in the UK, and it's probably general knowledge, is pubs are shutting at a frightening rate.
Yeah.
Last week, the industry, pub industry forecast, I know correctly, that in the next year, 365 days, a pub in England, not Great Britain, a pub in England will shut every day for the next year. So they are forecasting 365 pubs are going to shut. And since, dare I say, Rachel Reeves put the employer's national insurance up from the 1st of April, 66,000 people are now out of work from the hospitality industry because the employers, the pub owners, can't afford this new punitive tax on employers' national insurance. Unemployment's rising, and because people are having to leave the hospitality industry, and it's a really, sad and delicate economic situation.
And also the thing is, and I know this sounds like hackney, but the pubs. I mean, I used to work and drink in a variety of pubs, including the Coach and Horses, which was on Bread and Roses, on Clapham High Street. I was at the Alma, the Ship.
Oh, I know the Alma.
Yeah,
lovely. Just off, quite near to the river. Yeah,
Wandsworth Ridge Road, the Ship, all that lot.
I used to get out of the Ship a lot by the cement work.
Exactly. That used to go, and all the Royal Standard, because I'm all the rugby stuff.
Well, go between all three of them.
Exactly. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, they are distinctive. And now you go to a large urban centre, and it's a brand pub, and they all look the same, and they all taste the same, and they don't have the same as a decent pub will have. Yeah.
I think those pubs. Funny enough, I just sold a pub company but once I'd been brewing, all sorts of things happened, but some good, some bad. Yeah. But I eventually came back to England from America, where I was setting up craft breweries from New York to Seattle via Denver and God knows where. And I did a little brewery in Paris called Le Frog et Rosbif. But the development of the brand is quite interesting, because a lot of Young's pubs now all look the same, and a lot of, I think you were saying, a lot of the Fuller's pubs look the same. And they've all sold up now, which is so sad. Young's has stopped brewing in Wandsworth. It's now being brewed up in Warrington or somewhere, I think. And also Fuller's, guess what? Legendary Fuller's, now owned by the Japanese. Asahi own Fuller's. So it's quite interesting that the breweries that used to have the lovely pubs have only now got the pubs. The beer is not theirs anymore, and it's really sad. The whole world has changed, and I think that's why I was really lucky in the 80s, because all those opportunities were there. The big brewers were selling off their failed pubs, which was great for me, because I was able to buy their failed pubs, shove in a brewery, and the rest is history.
You got an OBE. How on earth did that happen? I mean, and what's the shock like when they arrive? I mean, I don't mean it's disparagingly, David, please.
I'll tell you a funny story on that, actually. It involves the wife as well. Because I was the last person...
What is the name of the good lady wife, by the way? Because
the good lady wife is not Erin Dawes, it's actually Louise.
Ah, wonderful. Right.
She doesn't like being called Erin Dawes.
Of course not.
Not nowadays.
So...
I didn't know anything about it, but she's always called OBE because her surname, of course, married to me is Bruce. So she calls it Other Bruce's Efforts, OBE.
Right.
But what might amuse you, and I know it's totally common knowledge, but once one's name's been put forward to the Cabinet Office and you got it rubber stamped by whichever Prime Minister it was at the time, because there were so many a couple of years ago, I can't remember which one it was, she took this phone call one day, was sworn to secrecy, and she said, your husband's been nominated for an OBE, but before we can take it any further, is he still alive? And she said, well, he was at breakfast time, but I better go and look in the garden and see if he still is.
Face down, surrounded by 40 ducks.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, it was a great honour, let me say. And it was actually, because what I did when I sold the Firkins is, guess what? Entrepreneurs get bored. We can't help ourselves. I'm 77 now and, loving life and busy, having a lot of fun. But so within a year of selling up in 1988, down on the canal one day, I saw some guy in a wheelchair trying to get onto a canal boat, and he couldn't. Right. There were no ramps, no hoists, no access, and even if he had got on, sitting in his wheelchair, he wouldn't have been able to see over the cabin. So I resolved, rather than like in that basement of that first pub, this is big enough to build a brewery, I had the same sort of epiphany moment and said, my goodness, I am going to do something about this, and started a charity, designed and developed and built a 12-berth boat, which took up to 8 people in wheelchairs with 4 able-bodied carers. And we did that 36 years ago, can you believe it? And we put about 80 grand of our, what I call Firkin proceeds, the sale proceeds, into this charity. Now, it's 36 years ago. And now there's 4 boats called the Bruce Boats, and they're in a place near Marlborough called Great Bedwin on the Kennington Canal. And they can go in either direction. They either go down to Bath and onto Bristol, or they can go to Reading and onto the Thames. And in fact, we had one of the boats full of disabled ex-servicemen from Afghanistan and Iraq on the boats at the 2012 Paralympics, moored up near the Olympic Stadium, so they could get there in their wheelchairs. Yeah. Anyway, we now had 30,000 disabled people each have a 1-week holiday on these canal boats. So that's why somebody put me up for the gong.
Wow, amazing! And
humble brewer,
humble brewer. So, why the book? Why did you decide to put it all down for posterity, David?
Oh God, for my posterior, did you say?
Yes, your posterior. No. Yes.
Hopefully, I still got a sense of humour. No, I tell you what, I don't know anyone on God's earth who's had such a completely bonkers, action-packed, fun life as me, and I just wanted to share it. So it's actually very cathartic, but it's not all good news. I hate everybody to think that I got some golden touch. I've had some horrific failures as well, which are all in the book. And within the book also, we have the lessons I've learned. But the first one goes right back to the start of this little chat, was don't listen to the experts. Don't let people put you off. And, there's lots of lessons in there. Don't burn out. Don't work your bollocks off so much you can't make the right decisions.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the thing about the art of delegation. But at the same time, is it a question of because you turn on your mobile device, which is the cursor or whatever, and people say, "Oh, go follow your dream, make your passion," and it's like, hey, yeah, but if that's fine as long as it's reasonable. I mean, opening a brewery, although it may seem like a madcap of it, rather than saying I want to cross the Andes by Natterjack Toad, for example, that might be your dream, but it's completely. Yeah. So having a sense of reality is also important, no?
Sense of reality. You're a bit fuzzy at the end there, but I hope that's okay. You can hear me all right, can you? Bad luck. You're a bit fuzzy then, but let's hope we can continue. I've lost the plot completely. You'll have to start that again.
Is it important though? Because as I said before, people are saying, "Yeah, well, I want to follow my dream and my passion." But if your passion is,
one of the things.
Yes.
The trouble with a lot of people is that they're conditioned, I think, either at school or university, that they've got to get a job. A normal boring job with a normal boring boss and normal salary reviews and, 360-degree whatever it is. And they then start worrying about their pension in 40 years' time, and they just become, flogging insurance or being a lawyer or an accountant or something. And I think there's so many people out there that have a dream, and guess what? They don't actually get round to doing it. And I had a pathological hatred of having a boss. And so that was another reason I became an entrepreneur. And I think lots of people out there with dreams, take a sabbatical. And people as they get older, don't just think, taking a year out is for young people. And there are quite a lot of people that just clear off and they disappear. They go off to Patagonia on a mule or something.
Yeah, exactly. The book is called The Firkin Saga, Brewing Entrepreneurial Adventures and Pioneering Tales with the Prince of Ales. It's by David Bruce, OBE. David, do you do the internet thing? Can people find you online?
Do you know, it's such a bad line now.
Can people find you online? Do you have a website? Do you TikTok? Do you do the social?
Yeah. It's David. Sorry, good publicity. David_Bruce. .com. But my email, if anyone wants to email, is much more fun as a brewer. I know I'm going to get inundated now. It is BRU@BREWHAHA.beer. Not .com, not .co.uk, it's .beer. And my car registration.
Come on. Yeah.
MI5, secret, BRU. So it's secret brew. So there's no escape from Bruce the Brewer.
Brilliant. Listeners, you can order the book by going onto our own virtual bookstore and clicking on the rather handsome picture of David and his humble pint. The book is called The Firkin Saga. It's by David Bruce, OBE. David, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today, sir.
And you. I hope we'll keep in touch.
I'm sure we can have a pint of something when you're in Marbella. How's that for
Come and have a beer one day.